Okay, so we remember our body mass index program where the user can enter his or her height in inches and weight in pounds and get a reading on the body mass index. We were given that formula before. This is nothing new. You know how to do something like this, simple application with controls and calculating some value if you're given a formula. What I'd like to do is enhance this application so that the user, after the BMI is calculated, the user will get a response or some sort of message saying your BMI is healthy, or your BMI is unhealthy, or something along those lines. Okay, so I want to bring this sheet up again real quick. This is the chart that we saw a couple weeks ago. And basically, if somebody's BMI comes in below 18.5, they're considered clinically underweight, all right? And then if they're in the range of 18.5 to about 25, then the BMI is considered normal or optimal or in the healthy range that the doctors and the nutritionists and all those people recommend. And then above 25, that is considered clinically overweight. Or these are just approximations, and they don't take into consideration things like muscle mass and all that. So let's just take it with a grain of salt. So anyway, what I'd like to do is, why don't we just first focus on this normal range here, the healthy range or optimal range, and we'll write a program so that if the user falls into that range, we'll tell them your BMI is in the optimal range, great job, or whatever. Okay. So how do we do this? We use an if-else construct or an if-else statement, and this is a very common thing to want to do and have to do in programming. It's probably if not the most important technique of our entire semester. I want you to get really, really good at it. And the good news is it's not difficult. It's not difficult because we do this naturally with our brains constantly. Every waking moment. If I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. If it's 6 p.m. on Tuesday night and, I'm going to get to Moraine because I have a class. If it's Saturday morning and I have nothing to do, then I'm going to sleep in. So, we're constantly making decisions. And even if we were a nutritionist and, somebody's BMI came across our desks and we've got that client on the phone and we saw they had a BMI of 20, we would just look at the chart and say, oh, your BMI is in the healthy range. We can make that decision of what to say to the client in a fraction of a second, okay? So you have to program that functionality into your application. So it takes a little bit of code, but luckily the logic behind what we're going to do comes very naturally to us. So let's just do it real quick, this healthy range option. So we'll say if the BMI is greater than or equal to 18.5, and this is a compound relational expression because it's in a range of numbers. The BMI, in order to be healthy, the person's BMI has to satisfy two criteria. It has to be above 18.5 and it has to be below 25. Okay, greater than or equal to 18.5, I should say, and below 25. So we'll say, okay, so that's the relational expression. It's a compound relational expression, and it's probably a good idea to have your relational operator quick reference sheet on hand, at least in the beginning while we're just getting started with this stuff. Okay, so if this is the case, if this happens to be true, if they're in that healthy range, then we're going to tell them that they have a healthy BMI. Okay, now the thing with this construct, it's like a sandwich, okay? And every sandwich, most sandwiches, have two pieces of bread, a top and a bottom. So what I'm getting at is you have to add this end if, okay? And then the code that you want to execute goes into the middle. So we'll say your BMI is optimal, we'll say, optimal. Okay? So, I'm making a big deal about the end if because it's really easy to forget. And if you forget it, and you have something like this, the program's not going to run. It's going to throw off the entire program, okay? And it's not going to work. I tell my students this is the equivalent of a sloppy Joe sandwich without a bottom piece of bread. It's not going to work, okay? So you always want to make sure you have that end if. And I add it immediately before I type the middle stuff. And then you'll always, just lay out the bread for the sandwich, both pieces, and then go into the middle and type. All right, and then very quickly, I'm going to update. We have FC controls. We need to set text. I have a label in there. The whole interface has been built in advance. So there's already a label there called LBL message, and in it I'm going to put the message that I just created here. All right, let's try it. Okay, we'll go back to our client who was 5 feet tall and weighed 100 pounds. Okay, the BMI was 20. That is indeed optimal, and they got a message saying so. Let's pretend that same person put on a ton of weight, well, a half ton of weight in this case, and their BMI is now much, much higher. Let's calculate that. Okay, your BMI is 195. Obviously, that's a ridiculous value, but just the point is, what we have here is a really black and white situation. Either their BMI was healthy and we told them so, or else it's unhealthy and we don't tell them anything, all right? And, ditto, what if the person only weighed 10 pounds? Well, let me clear that. What if the person only weighed 10 pounds, which, of course, is ridiculous, but, again, this BMI is way, way, way below optimal, and they're not being told anything at all. So it's like this, either it's healthy or it's not, and if it's not, they get nothing. So why don't we just enhance this a little bit so that if it's not optimal, we'll tell them it's not optimal. Okay, and then in the next video, we'll make it more specific, with the underweight and the overweight. So we'll say, or else, and a lot of this reads like plain English, doesn't it? If the BMI is between 18.5 and less than 20, and 25, then let's tell them the BMI is optimal. Or else, let's tell them that the BMI is not optimal. Okay. All right, so now we've got like a two-way street here. Either they'll get the optimal message or the not optimal message based on the body mass index. So let's run it again. We'll start with the optimal, the 100 pounds. Okay, BMI is optimal. Let's clear it out. And then we'll do way above optimal. Okay, not optimal. Good, that's what we were expecting. And then we'll do way below. Again, not optimal. So, like I said, it's not difficult. The only challenge, I think, is taking the English language or the English thoughts involved here, the kind of thoughts that would go through our head as we're looking at this table and, thinking about the client's BMI and what we're going to tell them. All of that is done in our brains in just a second or less. But when you have to think for the computer, which is what we're doing here, there's some code involved, and your relational operators come into play. So that's the challenge, is taking those English thoughts and translating them to code using your little symbols and whatnot. It will come to you naturally eventually, but I think there will be a little bit of awkwardness in the beginning, as there should be. So in the next video, we'll make this even more specific, and we'll tackle whether they're underweight or overweight.